Very good. Hello, everyone. Buongiorno, good morning, bonjour. I see we have quite the international crowd today. I'm Gabriel Zazzaprin. I know some of the people on the line today, principally in North America, based in New York City. Been with Avencore, and we'll tell you more about Avencore in a bit, almost since the beginning. So we've had the chance to work across the span of industries and type of projects we deal with, and excited to tell you more today about the supplier relationship.
And hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Honeycutt. I'm a manager with Avencore's North American office, colleague of Gabriele and Jessica. In my experience, worked across a number of sectors to include aerospace and defense, nuclear, and process manufacturing. That's been in and out of consulting. About 50-50 of my time has been split between consulting and then working embedded in the industry as well. I see a lot of familiar names showing up in our chat in terms of our client portfolio. So good to see you all again. Looking forward to this discussion today. Okay. So like I said, I think a good handful of you maybe have worked with us before, but just by way of introduction one more time, Avencore as a firm is a management consulting firm. We were founded in 2009, originally headquartered in France, and that is where our center of gravity is. However, we are separately incorporated in places such as Germany, the United States as well, and China. We are exclusively dedicated to industrial competitiveness and performance, and we support our clients on things such as growth strategy, performance improvement. That includes products, investments, processes, things of that nature. CapEx performance is a big topic as well. And then the acceleration of transformation topics to include things such as change management, organizational design, organizational model transformation, and capabilities. And more recently, development within our practice is the support of data and AI solutions, which are helping us accelerate all of these offerings, help our clients maintain their competitive edge from an analytics perspective. In terms of our profile, as I mentioned, we are present across multiple different geographies. Originally started in France, have a couple of offices in Germany as well, Düsseldorf and Heidelberg. Our North American heartbeat is in New York, and then we have a presence in Shanghai as well. Across that full portfolio of offices, with about 130 consultants strong. As mentioned, we were started in 2009, so about 15 years of industrial experience, and that spans a number of industrial sectors, which we will jump into here in a second, just to give you a taste of our breadth of experience. So as you can see, we touch all industrial sectors here. Automotive, aerospace and defense, industrial equipment, and energy and nuclear tend to be some of our mainstays, but we have deep breadth in some other industrial verticals as well. We'll try to bring some of those perspectives from each of these sectors into the conversation today, as I think one of the value adds that Avencore tends to bring forward is best practices, benchmarks, perspectives from industries where maybe our clients don't have much exposure that they could actually strongly benefit from. So with that being said, go ahead and hand it over to my colleague. Well, actually, to start, maybe we should level set on what the focus of this the webinar is for today. So supply chain issues have been a perennial topic, especially in recent years. Tariff impacts, to name maybe one of the largest concerns that we hear from our clients, has really spurred this discussion about supplier relationship strengthening. So we've had several clients coming forward, sharing some difficulties, some pain points in adapting their relationships with their suppliers. Whether that means that they are not necessarily the preferred customer for their suppliers, or maybe their suppliers themselves just aren't well positioned to meet the demand that our clients have for them. It can cut both ways. And this runs the gamut from clients that are large industrial groups all the way down to smaller 150 personnel operations. They still face the same recurring roadblocks. So today, what we want to bring forward in this discussion is a synthesis of what we've observed, some of the challenges that we've been hearing from our clients, what we think about them, and how we kind of think about the solutions that we tend to bring forward in collaboration with our clients. And now I'll go ahead and hand it over to Gabriele, get us kicked off into some of the deeper content for today.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So yeah, what does the supply relationship look like in 2026? There was COVID, supply disruptions, various conflicts, and everything got quiet. Well, not really. These days, disruptions take the form of geopolitical tensions, AI disruptions, global trade constraints. Sometime between a Friday and a Saturday, a global tariff percentage may change, as you've seen recently. So in 2026, industrial companies really operate in an environment that's very turbulent with uncertainty, and between rapidly evolving customer demands, geopolitical crises, the upcoming USMCA reviews, the accelerated deployment of AI and digital tools, it is a bit necessary to adapt. This context requires several types of action: developing greater flexibility to quickly adapt to market changes, price volatility, rethink the supply localization. You hear about nearshoring, regionalization, all those are gaining traction. While new US tariffs, I think these days everybody has become familiar with the infamous Section 232 on steel, copper, and aluminum. So all this tariff turbulence adds further constraints. Another necessary action is to fully leverage data, move towards AI, not only collecting data, but also exploiting this data in a smart way to anticipate and act faster, and also really get integrated into the industrial sector ecosystems. Industrial companies are increasingly structured as interconnected ecosystems, and of course, remaining isolated is not possible anymore. It really creates a lot of risk. Rather than diving into the multiple facets of these four topics, today we want to focus on a key enabler of overall performance, which is revisiting, maybe rethinking a bit your relationship with your suppliers. To address this, we will explore four key themes throughout the presentation: how to segment your suppliers. So it's really a strategy to clearly understand the nature of that relationship, the balance of power between yourself and your suppliers. Enhancing the experience of your suppliers. Time can be challenging, disruptive, turbulent. So it's really about strengthening the reliability, the day-to-day engagement during the on-cycle basis. So when you're doing business, developing products with those suppliers, but also supporting the suppliers in their own development, implementing concrete actions, providing feedback, accelerating their maturity, and being aware also of their technology roadmap. In the end, as we mentioned already, digitizing, if we can use that word, that relationship, making collaboration seamless and really data-driven in a smart way. So these are the four themes we'll be jumping in throughout this hour that we are together. And I will let Taylor jump into the first one.
All right. Thank you, Gabriele. So let's talk about segmentation of your supplier portfolio. So just imagine for a second, maybe you've already done this in your scope of work, but you've segmented your supplier portfolio into, say, A, B, and C, where A is maybe where your preferred suppliers are, maybe their time to market historically has been better, you have a longer standing relationship with them, who knows. That's typically the suppliers that you would go to first. So you launch a tender involving several of those suppliers within category A, and surprisingly, you don't really get many responses from any of them. You start scratching your head, what's going on? These are the folks that I typically like to work with. Am I going to have to start turning towards my B's and C's, which I really wouldn't like to do? So you need to start asking yourself some questions to start, and this is really from the perspective of the suppliers. Maybe why did they not respond to you? Things like, what revenue do they generate with you? Is it secured over time? Are they making decent money off of your relationship? More to that point, is the margin sufficient? Are they offering you good enough terms to where it makes sense to continue selling to you, or could they be going to one of your competitors? Do you pay on time? And hopefully the answer is yes, but you should be honest with yourself. We historically hold up our end of the bargain. Can they trust us to maintain currency in our fulfillments? And lastly, just, is it easy to work with you? Are your expectations clear? Are they consistent? Is it more of a headache than it's worth, essentially, for this supplier to potentially be continuing to engage with you. So depending on the answers to some of these questions, and maybe if they start to come back a little bit, insightful, you might not have recognized that there were some pain points or some gaps here. You may come to find that you are in an asymmetric relationship with these suppliers. You might need them more than they need you. And of course, that's not necessarily the place that you want to be. So how do we think about this segmentation? Well, we'd like to start incorporating a bit of a supplier perspective. On the vertical axis of this chart you see here, we have a measurement of the supplier's interest in working with you. So those that are a little bit higher up on the scale, those would be your suppliers that would prefer to answer a tender, maintain a relationship with you. They trust you as a customer. On the horizontal axis, your interest in working with the supplier. Are they more important to you? Is this a relationship that we can't stand to lose? The answer is yes, of course. That supplier will fall more towards the right end of this matrix. So to start, talking about the situation that I just laid out, where your category A suppliers maybe aren't showing up, they're not responding to your tender offer. So let's look at a couple of highlighted, matrix points that kind of fall into this category A scenario. So to start in the top left, we have a situation where your supplier is highly dependent on you. In other words, they are a captive supplier. They have to actively work to exit the situation. Now, they may be trying to do that, but nonetheless, the motivation is there. And it's not necessarily too terribly easy. Maybe you have a little bit better leverage to salvage this relationship. Maybe they might just be trying to diversify their customer portfolio as well. If you happen to be really the only customer that they sell to, well, that's a strategic risk for them. If we turn our eyes a little bit down towards the bottom right, where we have our critical suppliers, this is a position of strength relative to you as the customer. At this point, this particular supplier can threaten to disengage, lever its position to increase costs. In this particular situation, they're kind of holding the bag. So let's think about an example of the dependency trap vis-a-vis this supplier. So for example, we've seen a situation with an industrial equipment manufacturer. They develop and sell chassis in the automotive industry. Supplier controlled both the raw material and the process, and they own the toolings. For 5 years, for unchanged parts, their unit costs increased by about 47%. Yet no resourcing was initially initiated. The risks associated with the non-recurring costs, investments, restrictive group policies led to acceptance of the price increases. This case highlights a key point. The relationship was never unbalanced, and the supplier held excessive power. It is therefore essential to regularly reassess the supplier's position to avoid such pitfalls. So just from this example, we can conclude that supplier management approaches can differ significantly depending on how much they need you, how much you need them. Procurement marketing orienting approaches, so looking down at the bottom right, it's a little bit more relevant to your critical suppliers. Talking about aiming at attracting and retaining suppliers with the appropriate capabilities, of course, that is critical, while also maintaining risk management capacity and anticipating potential exit strategies, right? So always know if you have alternatives within your B's and C's portfolios, for example, should you need it, should your risk management frontline kind of break down and you don't have a whole lot of negotiation leverage with this particular supplier. Now, turning back up to the top left with our captive supplier, this is a little bit more focused towards a compliance-oriented approach. So as the risk of a sudden disruption remains present, this is where a situation, this captive supplier, maybe we need to be taking a little bit more of a compliance-oriented approach. And then looking more towards the middle positions here. So these suppliers can go one way or the other. It just depends on what is the relative importance to you as the customer. But either way, in this vertical right down the middle, this is where management should be focused on clarifying ambiguity, making it very, very clear: is this a partner that we can further develop and strengthen a relationship with, or is it a possibility and maybe a necessity to start downgrading the relationship here? This is where it also becomes clear that efforts have to be tailored to the specific stakes of each relationship. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to your supplier relationships. And of course, this gets much more complicated the broader your supplier portfolio is. Naturally, supplier positioning within the matrix is not static over time, of course. Gabriele listed a couple of factors that are entirely external that can move a supplier around this matrix at a given notice. Other times, it depends on your business situation, what your needs are, what your willingness to pay is, what your demand signals that you're giving out are. The real objective here is to evolve the client-supplier relationship towards something that's mutually beneficial, either requiring fewer efforts from both sides. It's easy to buy and sell from one another, and in which case you're starting to shift a little bit towards the left, or starting to come up with something that's a little bit more strategic and longer lasting, moving these suppliers from this middle column a little bit over to the right and developing a greater joint commitment from both sides. Having said that, where you really like this relationship to fall, wherever the relationship currently stands, is eventually pushing it somewhere up in the top right quadrant of this matrix. So either, in best case scenario, you have established a strategic partnership with the supplier. And of course, there's a high degree of mutual commitment between the two of you. If it's a little bit less strengthened, maybe it's a partner supplier, one that is typically your go-to, doesn't require so much hands-on management. Nonetheless, this is a relationship that you expect to stand long-term. So what we might want to see in this particular case, let's just pick off an example here. If we're sitting in the crucial supplier relationship right now, the logical direction to head is potentially developing that crucial supplier into a strategic partner. Well, how do you do that? Well, we're going to start exploring this by examining how to enhance the supplier experience, both on cycle, meaning in your day-to-day operations, as well as off cycle. So supporting suppliers in the development journey. And this is something that is critically important. I found in aerospace and defense, where you have suppliers that maybe are a little uncertain about the demand signals that are coming their way. Maybe they anticipate, or you as the customer might anticipate, a 5-year demand horizon, and then that demand horizon actually evaporates within 2 years. Well, are your suppliers going to be willing to make investments to meet the capacity that you're asking for if they don't know if the demand's going to be there in 5 years or 2 years? This is where that off-cycle development becomes really important, and having a deep relationship with your suppliers really makes or breaks the long-term difference.
Okay, let's dive in. So how to improve, enhance the supplier experience? Well, the principle that we suggest to propose, it's really, and with our key or your key supplier, is really to monitor and promote the supplier experience in the same way that companies promote their customers' experience. Depending on the industries you are in, you probably have your colleagues, especially from sales, program management, that may complain about certain clients. Their demands are unrealistic in terms of deadlines. Sometimes they change their forecast. They require extremely high-level specific standards. And this can really affect the team's motivation, the relationship, because the client can become a source of frustration. It can even generate some job friction inside your teams that are exposed to those turbulent or challenging clients. If you face this situation internally, it's possible, or maybe even likely, that your suppliers may be facing those same challenges when they deal with your company. On the contrary, a supplier that enjoys a positive client experience, meaning it is probably supported, recognized, fed visibility, and integrated, it becomes more engaged, more reliable, more loyal, and potentially even better performing. So over the next few slides, we want to cover these 6 dimensions to structure a successful supplier experience. And starting with a trusted relationship. So first, ensuring that the foundation of that relationship is in place, enabling mutual understanding and mutual trust, in particular as it pertains to potential risks, and a lot of those these days. Relationships increasingly rely on rigorous initial qualification, regular updates on both sides, of course. You may have heard about know your supplier, know your client. And these should ensure that the supplier capabilities are properly assessed and aligned with the client needs. Having in place proper performance monitoring processes, KPIs, is necessary to maintain that initial level of trust. And we work a lot with the suppliers of our clients because in the end, they know the pain points, what makes the cost of products, what causes delays and issues. And several times they complain that they don't receive enough feedback. There's a lot of KPIs in place. They get measured by their clients, but they don't see the outcome of those measurements. They don't know how it impacts the relationship, and well, that doesn't improve the trust. Of course, it's also important to have a strategic alignment. The suppliers, as Taylor was saying, need to be convinced that your approach is not just a procurement initiative that will be scrapped at the first sign of market turbulence, and there's a lot of those these days. And of course, this requires an internal alignment within the client organization. Especially in industries that develop and leverage complex systems, subsystems, it's a good practice to implement an offline technology watch. So even when you are not directly in business developing a new product with that supplier, have regular touch points, and especially with your strategic suppliers, so that you have visibility on their technology roadmap. And this can accelerate, of course, the development of the partnership, but also the development of your products. We've seen it in the space industry, but even in more simple consumer products. If we have some players that can continuously enrich an internal database of technology solutions and roadmaps from their key suppliers. In space, it could be antenna systems. In automotive, it could be new clutch solutions, based, of course, on regular exchanges. This really primes the conditions for an ongoing strategic alignment. When a new program arises in your portfolio, these suppliers can be in a more quickly way mobilized, and it's also in a more effective way. And it also facilitates your job of aligning on the system specifications, because you already know which suppliers, which strategic suppliers may be, again, primed to meet your needs. Of course, this cannot be done just at the buyer level. There needs to be a vertical alignment across the hierarchy of your company. So a operational monitoring of the technology roadmap, but really combined with the executive level commitment. Of course, transparency also is important. It's key to share essential information to identify opportunities, anticipate risks. Sometimes difficult because there's always the push of meeting certain scheduled deadlines. We observed this recently in automotive related to some electrical harnesses. We had led the design to cost initiative, identified some relevant technical levels, cable colors, type of connectors, all of those promising ideas. But then, due to the constraints, our client issued a rushed RFQs with poorly defined requirements. Of course, the responses were difficult to exploit. Sometimes the costs coming in were even higher than what we expected, and so some of those design to cost ideas were scrapped. In the next iteration of the RFQ, we made sure that there was a more rigorous preparation, clear scope, well-targeted suppliers based on the capabilities of those suppliers, and the shared target price. And in the end, this strengthens the credibility and really engages those suppliers. You may seem demanding, but the clients, the suppliers will appreciate that. They will perceive you as a structured company, and in the end, it encourages the participation because, as Taylor was saying, the suppliers will perceive that, yeah, there's a real business potential, long-term opportunity with volumes and defined targets. I will let Taylor cover the remaining circles.
Thanks, Gabriele. So let's talk about a balanced relationship. So first and foremost, and I think this is probably obvious, but we'll go ahead and say it, this applies to all of your suppliers. It's not just those that are positioned in the upper right quadrant. Essentially, you want to be needed as much as you need them, right? As mentioned earlier, we want to drive towards establishing a healthy and balanced relationship. And in order to do so, it's essential to secure the control levers upstream, particularly contractual levers. So tooling ownership, transfer rights, just to name a couple, just setting some expectations up front and making sure that everyone's in agreement with those expectations before moving forward and actually executing the relationship. At the same time, you want to preserve competitive tension. Of course, can give too much leverage to one side or the other. And you also want to keep your options open for new entrants to the market, potential competitors to those suppliers as well. And so this is a prerequisite for being both a reliable and a respected client. In our DTC projects, our design to cost projects, which we typically do a lot and tend to be our bread and butter, our clients often tell us that collaboration with their suppliers is simply impossible, and that really the only procurement lever that they have is price negotiation. And frankly, from their perspective, they say suppliers really have nothing to gain from cost reduction. Okay, that's a fair point. In reality, though, we find that the opposite tends to be true. Opportunities that are co-developed together, and that kind of gets to the heart of what we're talking about here, is this is a relationship. Those are frequently transferable to other customers, meaning suppliers have much to gain, right? So what you do for your suppliers, they can turn around and provide benefit to other customers as well. And you might think one way or the other about that if those other customers tend to be your competitors, but that's neither here nor there. On the flip side, however, organizing supplier conventions or supplier creativity workshops does require the involvement of functions beyond just procurement. You have to bring in stakeholders from engineering, industrial operations. The list could potentially go on depending on what we're trying to fine tune in these discussions. And that can definitely become cumbersome. It can be challenging to get all those moving parts in the room at the same time. And that has to happen both on your side as well as the supplier side in order to maximize value. And of course, this is really to serve the purpose of, I think, going back to the transparent and aligned circles that Gabriele has already kind of talked through here, is making sure all the right voices are being heard in the room. Really what we want to achieve here is to clearly define the value that is created in this relationship and demonstrate the mutual benefit beyond just handing money over for a set of inputs, a set of products. And thereby, we mobilize a broad range of our stakeholders. Moving on to, I think, maybe even more foundational elements of the supplier experience and relationship is more of a collaborative mindset. And I think this actually really ties very closely to what we just talked about with supplier workshops and creativity sessions. Once again, being that this is meant to be a balanced and trusted and aligned relationship, it's never one against the other, but it's you and your suppliers working together. So I think back to an experience that we had in the defense sector. Again, there was it was a critical missile program within the defense sector. A strategic supplier was delivering battery support components. Those components had recurring quality defects. You tend to see this quite frequently. These are highly specialized components, even if they don't necessarily sound like it. Therefore, the customer delivery schedule was impacted. A lot of rework, a lot of replacement parts. At the end of the day, they weren't able to fulfill these missile units for the customer, which happened to be the Air Force in this case. Rather than immediately triggering contractual penalties, basically slapping the hand, saying you handed us defective parts and now you'll to recoup some of the invoices that we paid you already, or formal escalation, what we decided to do was establish a 3-level meeting or organize a 3-level meeting that included executive leadership, then the quality teams, and then the project managers from both sides. Within 2 days, we were able to collaboratively develop an action plan and then go and implement it, including on-site sorting, urgent replacement parts, and supplier process review. So really understanding where these quality defects were coming from so that we can come together and figure out a plan for mitigating those. Then we established governance mechanisms, which allowed some rapid escalation. But most importantly, there was a shared willingness to resolve the issue rather than assign blame. I think in our case, I say from the perspective of our client, the main goal here was just to be able to get their products out the door to include these battery support components. And for the sake of their supplier, well, they wanted to be able to hand off high quality products, make sure that they can stand by the battery support components that they're providing to their customer. So there's no point in assigning blame. We all had something to gain here. This collaborative approach ultimately strengthened trust. So it wasn't just mitigating the quality issue that was at hand at the time. We were able to, mitigate this issue up front. Couldn't avoid it, of course. We ran into it, but we handled it together, and it established a framework and a way of thinking going forward that prevented additional quality issues with this particular supplier in the future. So the collaboration element here was critical, not just for putting out the fire, but to making sure that no fires ended up, sparking again. And lastly, we'll talk about digital enablement. It seems that digital and data and AI enablements, these tend to come up in every conversation today. And they are just that. They are not a fix unto themselves. They are enablers. But with the rapidity of commerce these days, having access to clean, trustworthy data that is well governed, that is secure, is of course kind of the glue that holds all of this together. So here, the objective is to eliminate any friction points and the information that's being passed between the client and the supplier, thereby just getting rid of any opportunity for burden to be introduced to the collaboration, taking energy away from the organizations that have a problem to fix. And we'll talk a little bit more about this one in greater detail here in a moment. This is a bigger topic, if you'll recall some of the main points that we want to talk about today. But once we have all these levers in place, the relationship is now built on solid foundations, and you can begin moving toward the top of your supplier's preferred customer list, which is ultimately, of course, where we all want to be. So then we'll transition to our third topic here. This off-cycle idea of supporting your supplier development. And once again, this is, in my mind, a very, very important topic in the industries that I typically find myself sitting within, because they typically involve highly specialized components, low demand, I would say low volume. So every issue tends to be much, much larger. Supplier development is critically important here to make sure that those issues don't come to fruition. So of course, improving the supplier experience on a daily basis is essential. If you want to go further, it's typically, maybe, but I would say typically necessary to support your suppliers and increasing their maturity through a structured development trajectory over time. We'll show you kind of what that trajectory looks like here in a moment. But ultimately, your objective here is to secure their performance in the long term by working on their processes, their methods, their digital maturity, and their performance culture. And that way, they get a direct benefit from it. Of course, that part is obvious, but it also means that they can remain an available partner to you in the long term as well. So it's an investment that has a very clear return for both sides. So what does this journey look like? So we'll kind of take this from left to right, starting with foundations through stabilization, then finally acceleration. With each step, you're taking your suppliers from maybe a low performance status up to your best in class, more strategic suppliers. So starting with your foundations, what we're talking about here is ensuring that the basics to build a high performing and sustainable relationship are mastered and they're there. So this phase generally begins with a diagnostic of the supplier's strengths and weaknesses, know what needs to be fixed, what needs to maybe be leveraged going forward as an existing strength. From there, we define a development roadmap and the establishment of a partnership agreement that formalizes value sharing and confidentiality, among other elements. So of course, this takes it all back to relationship building, right? If we are investing in developing you as a supplier, we want more than just to be able to trust that the materials that we're procuring from you are high quality, but that you will be in the business in the long run. In a ramp-up context, so just to give an example of where we've done this before, one client conducted an assessment of some production capabilities among its main suppliers. And this allowed the client to differentiate between what suppliers were maybe more on the basic level and which were a little bit more advanced. And then from there can prioritize which subsequent actions needed to be taken. Some of them were supported first through stabilization and later through acceleration phases. Some needed more focus in this foundational side. Then if we turn towards the stabilization side now, okay, so we've got the foundations in place. We know what's broken, what maybe isn't quite broken, but could be further matured. Now we're actually going through the process of making those improvements. So this would involve implementing continuous performance monitoring mechanisms, as well as working on shared processes and governance. So, okay, you've come up with some solutions. We've triaged some issues with supplier performance. We've come up with a roadmap for how to improve it. Well, now you got to keep an eye on it, of course. You got to identify where the roadmap is working and where it's not, and fine tuning as you go. So thinking back to another example in the defense industry, one of our clients identified 4 key suppliers with whom it aimed. They wanted to be the preferred customer for these suppliers. So they implemented a structured governance model with those suppliers, enhanced some information sharing mechanisms with those suppliers, and they optimized their collaboration processes. On the flip side, the suppliers greatly appreciated this approach as they gained better visibility into their bid conversion rates on this client's tenders. And this enabled them to focus on the most relevant opportunities as well. So what do we want to bid on because we know we're well positioned to do so, versus what we want to hold back for because it's just not worth the energy and effort that would go into it. They can better understand the expectations of our clients, and then thereby finally significantly reducing the effort required to respond to those RFQs. In addition to that, though, many risks, such as lengthy negotiations on general terms and conditions, were addressed proactively. So they got a lot of the table stakes stuff out of the way pretty quickly. Thereby, those negotiations were much faster, much more efficient. And so finally, as a result, 2 of those 4 suppliers agreed to permanently reduce their margin rate for this client. Good news for our client, recognizing that reduced commercial effort translated to lower costs. And then lastly, if we turn towards acceleration, okay, so we figured out what needs to be fixed. We've started to fix it. We've monitored the fix as it goes. The client's starting to stabilize a little bit better. In turn, we are developing a stronger relationship. Now let's take it to best in class. So the objective here for this final step is to help suppliers maintain that performance momentum over the long term by leveraging some more advanced tools and mechanisms, particularly to strengthen the collaboration between yourselves and the suppliers. So in the context of a complex program that we faced in the past, the client's production department was suffering from supply disruptions from a supplier, leading to missing parts, as the supplier was putting it, and significant production related delays as a consequence of that. Despite contractual commitments and existing collaboration, the supplier wasn't able to come forward and provide greater visibility on shipments and why these missing parts were missing. And it in and of itself was dependent on a highly complex value chain. And that was a large part of the issue. Okay, so we have clear visibility into the N-1 level with our suppliers now. But as we see in defense, pretty typically, that's about as far as the visibility goes. And when we get to the tier 2s and 3s and below, where the problems actually really tend to stem from, all of a sudden it's very opaque. So the client and the supplier therefore decided to jointly develop a collaborative digital platform to track deliveries on a daily basis. Thereby, they can anticipate upstream supply chain bottlenecks. They can manage those action plans to mitigate those delays. And lastly, I promised that we would turn back to this. Data and digital is a big topic, so I'll hand it over to Gabriele to take us through this last step.
Yeah, we're coming towards the end of our journey together today about the relationship and experience with suppliers. So we talked so far about 3 major levels: the segmentation, the supplier experience, the development of the supplier on the journey. And you've heard and you know, and you started to see how the data digital tools can not only activate these levers, but also help accelerate them. Of course, the goal today is not to cover all the potential digital use cases in the client-supplier relationship. The idea is more to highlight the importance, the breadth of topics that can be addressed through, we look at them through a digital lens or optic. Just as a few examples, well, in procurement, of course, there are plenty of use cases related to just simple sourcing or screening, pre-qualifying suppliers through external databases, mapping tier N so that you can possibly work together to mitigate or anticipate some of the tariff impact, intelligent RFQs, supplier relationship management solutions, among others. In quality, data and AI can be leveraged to streamline processes, reduce the cost of non-conformances. I remember a client in the aerospace sector, they implemented a solution to manage non-conformances in both directions with the suppliers. So one end, escalating non-conformances, deviations to the suppliers to act on containment analysis, corrective actions plans, but also downstream communication of supplier alerts to the end customers so that they can adapt their assembly line or anticipate those kind of disruptions. In innovation, this can help stimulate the collaboration. You can think of digital twin technologies. These really create opportunities to collaborate on complex product development while ensuring the required level of confidentiality. And this results in significantly shorter development cycles. And this is even more relevant when you start thinking about enabling distributed development centers across the world so that you can have round-the-clock cycles of development. In finance, you can, of course, enhance budget control, suppliers' performance management. This makes it also less cumbersome to circle back to the suppliers, provide feedback and opportunities for improvement. It can go from simple supplier portals that provide information, order, invoice status. You would think it's pretty easy nowadays, but a lot still goes through emails, phone calls, and all of that, or through automated analysis of compliance between contractual terms, invoices, enabled by customized workflows. So really going beyond the typical ERP. And we get towards the conclusion of our journey today. We hope we've illustrated how the client-supplier relationship in 2026 needs to change and can enable you to address some of your challenges. We really believe, but also see almost every day in our projects, that once you embark on this journey and become a preferred customer of your key suppliers, you will be in better positions to secure critical capacities. There's many sectors nowadays that see an explosion in demand, and the suppliers are in a strong position, and they decide who gets the parts and the capacity of the machines. Accelerate innovation by having a front seat to their latest technologies. Same, we've seen it many times. We've had a specific case where we're doing a blind search of suppliers that could provide certain knowledges. And one of our clients realized that one of their suppliers was providing that technology to a competitor. There was no exclusivity clause. It's just that they had a better relationship and they were providing it to the other party and had never mentioned it with this specific client. Again, you can also use supply chain risk, achieve your economic objectives, and in the end, really improve your economic performance in a sustainable way. The idea was not to say to have some major wow effects today. You're professionals around the table or the screen today, but there should be nuggets throughout the presentation and the journey of today to sprinkle some further thoughts and reflections, and of course, always happy to dive into these topics across the entire journey. I would like to open the floor to questions. I know that, Jessica, you've been keeping an eye on questions coming through. I want also to really thank everybody during these busy days to take the time to attend this presentation today. Jessica, any key questions? Let's get to the juicy ones.
We have a couple we can start off with, and I invite everyone to continue submitting those live on the portal. But our first question we can start with is, what tangible benefits have been observed among clients and suppliers who've achieved that preferred customer status?
Well, it goes a bit. I appreciate that we all want to be concrete. It goes a bit to this. I have this example in mind I was just touching on. If you have visibility on the technology roadmap of the suppliers, that really saves you a lot of time, gives you a better competitive position. I mentioned briefly this situation where we're doing this blind search of a specific technology. And so we contacted several suppliers, known, not known by our client. And that's where, and again, we're not presenting ourselves as the client, it was just Avencore. And that's where we discovered that one of the suppliers of this client, they were providing the technology with a pretty significant technological advantage to a competitor. While in other cases, there's been more sharing, alignment, and that goes also with what Taylor was saying about maintaining that relationship also off cycle, so that you can almost pre-integrate some of those technological advances into your development plans, and many times also get some economic advantages along the way.
Great. And I can bring us to our second question. Among all the actions we discussed today during this webinar, what would you say should be prioritized?
I'll jump on this, Gabriele. I'm happy to hear your thoughts on this as well. But from my point of view, I think, well, it largely depends on the situation within your supply chain. So first and foremost, that segmentation of your portfolio, that's foundational. That has to be done no matter what. So we're talking about just sequencing. That should be prioritized because you need to know where your supply base is falling in terms of your need for them and their need for you. Okay, so that's kind of table stakes. I think everyone should probably agree with that. I personally, I tend to look at these things through the lens of my experience, which weighs heavily towards either aerospace and defense or the nuclear sector, as I mentioned before, where there are a lot of commonalities in supply chain challenges. And the biggest ones that I think of are the fact that it's a typically narrow supply base relative to, I don't know, let's look at like automotive, where you've got potentially, thousands upon thousands of different suppliers for, I think, I don't want to say commoditized parts, but maybe less specialized parts than you would need in aerospace and defense or in the nuclear sector. Okay. So what you end up finding is a lot of the same players tend to be mom and pop shops with maybe low capability, low capacity, low throughput, and a lot of apprehension for bracing for uncertain demand signals, right? So in aerospace and defense, for example, I'll talk about commercial aviation, where demand seems to fluctuate for a given platform every couple of years. And you can think of a couple of the big players that have been having a lot of issues over the last few years where orders are getting canceled. That really drives a lot of that. So they might be putting out an RFP for a lot of parts that may have a 5-year horizon, as I kind of mentioned before. And maybe the suppliers that they have to work with are only a handful in the industry, and that's it. That's all you have to work with. Again, they're all mom and pop shops, and all of them say, we don't have the capacity for this. Like, we need some investment. If we are going to try to expand our capacity, be able to meet the demand that you are setting forth for us now, we have to be certain that that risk is not all on our laps, right? Is the demand signal going to go away in a couple of years? And all of a sudden we have made this huge CapEx investment in expanding capacity. We don't need it anymore, and puts them out of business. So where I'm going with this is that off-cycle supplier development, in my mind, tends to be probably the more important thing in industries where you are typically procuring highly specialized components, because a lot of times, if you're only working with a very narrow and shallow pool of suppliers, they're not going to be willing to eat the risk of fulfilling demand that you're putting out. You need to be working with them and shouldering some of that risk as well, saying, hey, we are willing to invest in you to expand your capacity, enhance your capabilities, give you some insulation against uncertain demand signals. That way you can give us what we need without fear of being left holding the bag if the demand signals go away. So that's my point of view, coming from certain sectors. Gabrielle, if you had any additional thoughts to add, you come from a slightly different world, so I'm definitely eager to hear your thoughts on it as well.
No, I think you cover it pretty well. It seems to apply across a lot of different sectors. Maybe we can jump to another question.
Definitely. So our next question has two parts. So for the first part, we have, what do you mean by a procurement marketing oriented approach? And then following up on that, do you have any examples of practices to attract and retain suppliers that you can provide?
Yeah, marketing oriented, it means, making procurement less transactional, I would say. In terms of practices, things like joint events, activities that highlight the relationship with the supplier, even at times awards, gold, silver, bronze suppliers. We really seen the benefits of some of these supplier conventions, webinars if you don't want all your suppliers to travel. And sometimes clients are a bit worried, but they will see each other, they will share cost. They all talk. Industries as big as they are, they're always small communities. So you better sure that they talk well about you rather than not talking, right? But even, and as I said initially at the beginning, we visit a lot. We work with a lot of the suppliers of our clients, and they are so proud to show some of these awards. Of course, it depends on the size of those companies, but there's really value in these kind of events. It also goes back to another point where sometimes they drive blind. They know that you track performance, deliveries, on-time delivery, PPM, all that kind of stuff, but sometimes they don't have any feedback. So how can they improve? Is if they're not, they get pestered on when maybe they are late, and then things goes well, silence. Well, there should be a communication not only in the bad times but also in the good times, right? So I hope it answered the question. I know we're coming up on time, maybe one or two more. Jessica, from the list.
Let me see what we have. Do you have any examples you can provide us with where an improved supplier relationship accelerated adaptation to market changes or geopolitical constraints?
I have one, unless Taylor, you want to jump in?
Go ahead and give yours. I've got an idea as well.
Okay. Well, I would say in the last 18 months, there's been a lot of Avencore initiatives with clients focused on tariff mitigation, all those aspects. And we really seen the full spectrum. It's not necessarily tied to specific regions or size of suppliers or complexity of the parts provided, but we see the full spectrum from the stoic supplier that says, hey, pay up, this is the additional money for the tariff, to really suppliers that go the extra mile to find ways to re-engineer even HS codes of parts, talk with local governments. And when you dig a bit more into, well, why are we seeing this full spectrum of reactions and way of working, you realize that, well, in some cases, the relation has always been very transactional. We're not here, of course, to paint a rosy picture where, everything will go well, do the journey, even the tougher suppliers will turn around. Hey, business is business in the end. But where the supplier goes the extra mile, you see that, they've been provided regularly with high-level forecasts, projections of the demand, upcoming changes in designs or trends, part numbers that will be shut down but replaced by other ones. So there's been a continuous communication, as Taylor said, on cycle, off cycle, and in the end, you see the benefits. It may not be huge benefits. It's not like, we completely rewrote an LTA or that, but a little bit every single day brings benefits, and in the end, it also makes the life of your sourcing and development teams and program management teams easier.
And I can maybe just add another thought. I kind of covered this example a little bit in my explanation, my last response, but There was an example in the defense industry once again where it was one of the major tier 1 players. They were sole sourcing a specific, highly specialized component for a missile system. Demand fluctuations were absolutely there, and they knew that at the current state, the demand signals looked like there was going to need to be a manufacturing ramp up. Well, that sole source supplier for that one component said, hey, we're not really in a position to ramp up capacity right now, and we don't really believe that it's worth the investment here either. We don't trust that demand signal is going to last. Well, one of the solutions that was brought forward was taking a look at the tooling, the processes that were meant to, or they're currently in place to develop those components that were delivered to our customer, and take a step back, try to make them a little bit more standardized and modularized. So that way, not only could there be an opportunity for rapid capacity expansion, should those demand signals last and market changes, don't end up being that unpredictable, but if they were to change, very quickly that supplier could pivot to design and engineering of a different component as well, following the trends of the market. So they weren't stuck just producing one single component. Now they had a little bit better flexibility in their market offering.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. With that, we can wrap up our webinar for the day. I would just like to say thank you so much for all of our attendees for joining us today, as well as Taylor and Gabriele for sharing your expertise.
Thank you, everyone. Get on that journey. Have fun with it.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.